Care and use of your grinder is essential for making high-quality sausage. A grinder is working well when meat is passed readily through the grinding plate and a clear meat particle definition can be seen. The setup of the grinder is simple enough. Be aware that a lot of these grinders are extremely heavy and they're clumsy to handle. It's best to store these on a shelf that you don't have to bend over and pick them up. And don't forget to tighten the thumb screw that fastens these auger heads onto the grinder, so that when you pick these up, if they don't have a handle and stuff, that this head doesn't come off in the midst of picking it up. Hand crank grinders will need to be clamped to a counter such as these, and a lip of these counters need to be strong enough because you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on the handle to crank the meat through. As far as the setup is concerned, just set this auger and seat it onto the motor shaft on this. One thing that I like to do here before we fire up a grinder is that it really needs to have oil put on the plate, because you're going to be dry firing this. This is only done when you're first going to fire it up, because there's no meat in here to lube this plate. So to preserve your plate and knife, it's always best to oil these up here. The head ring that goes on this, as far as how tight should it go, the reason that they don't have wrenches for these things is because they are just hand tightened. If you over tighten this and really crank it down, you can end up with rollback on your metal on your knife here, and it can actually start scoring your plate, so it's not a good idea. Just get it tight enough, run pass some meat through it and see if everything is functioning correctly here. You may have to just retighten it just a little bit after the first time. Just going to go through a quick little thing on the stuffing horn as far as getting it put on a grinder. Again, anything that I'm doing here can be also associated with a hand grinder, but to show that what may have come with your grinder is a star, and all the star does is just hold the shaft of your auger up, and it's just put into the grinder head here, and of course then all you need to do is just install your shaft here. But that's all there really is to it here. I'll take this off and get back where we were again. Prior to grinding any of your meats, what you will want to be doing is to chunk up your meats to make them pass through the grinder easier through these holes here. You don't want to have big chunks of meat here, just makes it a little bit more frustrating. Your meat in the first place should be a little bit frosty, just because it creates a better grind through these home type grinders like this, especially if you're using a smaller plate. Plus the fact you don't want to get it too cold or frozen, because then the meat can't get picked up by the auger and the grinder here. You don't want to force meat through the grinder either. The meat's only going to flow through here as fast as this grinder is set up to run. Forcing it's not going to accomplish much, and in fact it can warm up your meat, and you can start causing a separation between your fat and your protein, and that will produce a poor quality sausage. So that's something you don't want to be doing when grinding meat. If you're grinding heavy fat trim, back fat, the best way to get that through this grinder is to also run lean meats through after it. That's why in some cases it's good just to mix all that together, your back fat and your lean meats, so that they all go through and they can all push themselves through. If you've got fat that's kind of hung up in here, run some lean through, and that'll force that meat through there. Eventually, knives and plates will become dull or worn. Meat that is pale, mushy, and lacks particle definition when it comes out of the grinder can be a sign of dull, worn knives and plates. Bone or gristle actually can get plugged into some of these holes here that creates plugging up, and that can also create problems. So that's something that should be checked as you're doing this. And the head ring also is a sign where it may need to be checked first just to make sure that it's firmly against the plate and knife. Before and after knives and plates are used, closely inspect for grooves or nicks or galling so that you're sure that this is a good sharp plate. If the knife is dragging metal, if it's too tight, it can drag some of the metal into these holes. It can be hard to see, but that's why they need to be inspected very closely. As well, with this here, these case hardened type plates can begin to lose their case hardening as the knife wears through this surface here, and in that case you just have to replace the plates.
When you change or put in a new plate, it's best to oil it with food grade oil or cooking oil. Plates and knives can rust if put away wet. Dry and oil your plates and knives for storage.
This method can be used to dress your knife and plate. What basically we're going to do is we're going to take some wet, dry sandpaper to do this. One thing that I'm going to do here is first of all, I'm going to check this plate to make sure it's perfectly flat. And to do that, all you need to do is have a nice flat surface like this. This for mica would work as well, but it should be perfectly flat. If that plate isn't perfectly flat, obviously it's going to wear the knife and it just absolutely needs to be replaced. But to start with here, what we do is we start with a coarse wet dry paper and get some water on it. And earlier I showed that there was some grooves, you couldn't feel them, but this will give you the idea. But take and use a circular motion and polish this plate for a couple minutes and check your work to see if you're making progress. This is the initial removing of probably the deeper grooves in the plate. And at the same point in time, you can also take your knife and just dress it. If it's got some minor grooves, sometimes you can take out small nicks. And then just graduate up to, like this here is about a 200 grit, but start graduating to a finer grit. This here happens to be a 400. You'll be surprised how much difference this will make in your plate. I've taken out quite a bit of those grooves already. But this gives you an idea how fast and how easy this process is. If you're consistent with this, you'll always have nice sharp plates and knives to work with. And I'll just graduate up to a real fine 600 grit and just polish this off. This type of paper is available in most hardware stores or places that might handle sanding papers for body work, car body work. But essentially that's it. We can zoom in on that just a little bit because it really makes a big difference.